Chairman, Admiral, General, Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Thank you for your service to our nation. Secretary Mabus, I'd like to talk some about the proposed reductions to our military in the context of alternative avenues for cost savings. The Army right now is planning on reducing its size by 6 brigade combat teams by 2019, according to this year's budget request. And those proposed cuts concern me greatly. The Department of Defense continues to spend billions of dollars on alternative energy research and programs at DoD that I think are far less essential than maintaining our readiness and ability to defend our national security interest. For example, the Navy spent $170 million on algae fuel, which costs 4 times as much as regular fuel, which means potentially $120 million was spent unnecessarily. And even in these tight budgetary times, the Navy budget now contains nearly $70 million in this year's budget for a request for the Navy Energy Program, which funds research and development activities such as the algae fuel research program. And the first question I wanted to ask is, instead of buying algae fuel, which even the National Research Council says is currently not sustainable, the Department of Defense could instead field nearly a battalion's worth of active duty soldiers, or even more National Guard troops. And Secretary Mabus, I would welcome your views in light of the threats we face, whether you would support more Army infantry troops instead of money spent on algae fuel.
Senator, now is exactly the time that we have to diversify our energy sources. We're facing in Navy, in FY11 and FY12, we got an unbudgeted $1 billion increase in fuel costs for each year, $2 billion that we had not budgeted for because of the spikes in the price of oil. If we don't get a American-made, more stably based source of fuel, if we don't get some competition into the fuel, we're looking at fewer soldiers, fewer sailors, fewer platforms. That's exactly why we're doing this. The $170 million you mentioned is not for algae fuel. It is for alternative fuels. And you'll be happy to know that we now are working with 4 companies that are obligated to provide us with 163 million gallons of biofuel by 2016 at less than $3.50 a gallon. So we're not going to buy any alternative fuels that aren't absolutely price competitive. But if we don't do this, because oil is a global commodity, oil is traded globally, and every time there's something happening in the world, every time you have somebody threatening to close a strait, or just instability, oil traders add a security premium. And every time the price of oil goes up $1 a barrel, it costs our Navy and Marine Corps $30 million additional in fuel. So now is exactly the time that we have to do it, or we will face more cuts, just like the type you were talking about.
Now, your comment was that we needed an American-produced energy source that was stable and reliable. And as I'm sure you're aware, we're in the midst of an energy renaissance right now, where the United States is on track in the next few years to become the world's top producer of natural gas, and a few years later, the world's top producer of oil. Is it your view that the Department of Defense is going to somehow revolutionize the study of algae or alternative energy? I mean, is that really the core function of the Navy? And at a time when the Navy is proposing, for example, cutting 5,000 Marines, eliminating 2 Marine infantry battalions. Now, obviously, your job is to prioritize. And my question is, which is a higher priority, preserving those 2 Marine infantry battalions or continuing to research algae fuel in the hopes that somehow the world energy market can be transformed by the Navy's research?
Well, to start with, I'm very glad that America is increasing its production of oil and natural gas. But oil is a globally traded commodity. And even if we produce as much as we could need, and the military is going to go to the head of the line in terms of fossil fuels or any other kind of fuels, we are dependent on the world price. And that's what's been just skyrocketing our fuel cost. And that's what I talked about a more stably priced American-produced version. We're not researching algae, Senator. The research has been done. The production is there. We are moving toward changing the way we use fuel. We're doing energy efficiency as well. If we don't do these things, the cuts that you talked about, and you're absolutely right, you have to set priorities. This is a priority that will save ships. This is a priority that will save Marines, and it is a priority that will save Marine lives.
Senator Cruz, if I could interrupt because there's votes on here now. I'm going to call, Senator McCaskill will follow you, and then she's going to have to vote, and Senator Hirano is here as well. We're going to, if there's no one here, when they're done, we will recess for 10 minutes because I will be coming back. So when you're done, Senator Cruz, you have about another half minute or so. It will then go to Senator McCaskill.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My final question is this. In a hearing before this committee, Secretary Hagel responded to the same line of questioning. And he characterized the algae fuel program and also programs such as a wind farm in Alaska that was built where there's no wind as, quote, luxuries. Now, from your testimony today, it sounds like you don't agree with Secretary Hagel's characterization. And so I would welcome your views on whether you think he's right or wrong that these programs are luxuries, and whether the priority, in my view, the number one priority should be maintaining readiness and the capacity to defend our national security, which means the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines necessary to protect our interest, and that should be prioritized above luxuries. Do you agree with that or not?
I absolutely agree that the number one priority ought to be readiness, and that's why we're doing the alternative fuels.
And do you agree with Secretary Hagel's characterization?
Senator, I didn't hear Secretary Hagel's characterization, but I'm confident that in these energy terms, that he did not state that they were luxuries.
Thank you.
Thank you.